Hey friends, it's MJ from the Coaches Panel. I hope you are. Welcome back to another player review as we talk about Dylan Stephens today, traded from the Sydney Swans, now a North Melbourne Kangaroo. What does it mean for the club he's left, for the club he's arrived at, and for those of us that play AFL Fantasy, SuperCoach, and AFL Dream Team, what does it mean for us as we play these games in 2024 and beyond? Let's talk about what it means for the Swans. They were pretty happy to let him go in the end. They did spend some pretty high draft capital a handful of years ago now, a top 10 pick on the Victorian that was actually spending a lot of time in South Australia, a Swan, and now has made his way to the Kangaroos. There was a lot of contrast in his draft year that he was like very Lockie Whitfield-esque early on in his career. And as good as I've shown moments and seen from Dylan Stephens, the reality is he's just not cracked best 22. A dozen games over the past 2 years, and while he probably solidified himself, or at least I thought he did, at the back of 2022 season when Sydney made their grand final run, the reality is it was clear that in 2023 that elevation to the next part of his game didn't quite happen. And while he played 13 games this year, multiples of these were vest-affected games. I think of 2 games where he started as a green vest. I think there was 1, potentially even 2, where he subbed out of the game. But Dylan Stephens at Sydney was playing off the wing, and their midfield just kept growing and growing and growing, so much so that they were playing Callum Mills through the wing. Justin McInerney's been a really classy outside runner for them. Errol Goulden moved from the half forward line and became more of a wingman, and then at times throughout the year a centre bounce midfielder. So for Dylan, he just started to drop further and further down the pecking order, and it's why for Sydney they were happy to let him go for relatively cheap draft capital. I don't think Sydney are going to feel like they're missing him too much at all. Braden Campbell, I think they like him more up around the ball. Maybe not so much ever as an inside mid, but again, they love his beautiful use of the ball by foot. Not the fastest player, Braden Campbell, but you get the likes of Goulden and Campbell as elite kickers on the outside. You get a beautiful runner like a Justin McInerney. Papley has some speed in and around off the game. Yes, he's playing more as a small forward that pushes up, but he brings some speed and chaos. So the skills of Dylan, which is good runner, decent user of the ball, kind of a lot of very good assets, but nothing overly elite in any one specific category. I think the Swans don't feel too disappointed to let him go. For North Melbourne, though, this is a great addition for them. They're pretty stocked on the inside of their midfield: Wardlaw, Phillips, Powell, Luke Davies-Uniacke. But the outside is where they could do with a little bit of work, a little bit of class, a little bit of run. And Dylan Stephens brings that for them. They've seen some departures in the outside parts of their game over the past couple of years. And I actually think North Melbourne, even before they've got to this draft, have been building actually really quite nicely. They've got some reasonable options down forward, especially on the tall side of things. They've got, I think, a really nice midfield core from Cherry and the ruck through to those midfielders that I've mentioned. And I didn't even throw Jai Simpkin into the mix of this. So they're laughing here, but they've needed some run and some class on the outside, and I can actually see Dylan Stephens coming straight into this side and playing across the wings for them. It wouldn't even shock me if they dropped him back to half back. I know Luke McDonald spent some time across the wings and half back this year, as well as a Harry Sheasel. So for me, I really like this addition. I can see him walking straight into the best 22 of the North Melbourne Kangaroos, and that's where us, from a fantasy community, he does become someone that is of interest to me. Great interest might be a slight exaggeration. Priced about 10 points per game off what he did the year prior. Now, a lot of that is vest-affected scores, but really he's not shown anything much more than a mid-60s scorer to date of his career. That said, outside of the back half of 2022, Dylan really never got heaps of opportunities. But that said, I remember the game early this year against the Gold Coast Suns where he had 27 touches, a heap of score involvements, tons across the format. He's shown that he can score. Now, if he's a pure mid, which I think he probably will be this year, wingmen generally aren't the greatest for us. And so in Classic, he's definitely someone to consider. But I can see a lot of people fading off him this year. Drafts is where he's really going to pop. He'll fly under the radar there in a couple of formats, and a lot of coaches won't consider him, but astute coaches can see him as a mid to late draft pickup. I can see him going 80 plus in his average this year. Like I said, he's not a bad inside mid. I think he's got some inside traits. I think he's better on the outside, good runner, good user of the ball. I think he'll link up nicely across their flanks, and he'll play a really good role as a relief when you've got guys like Wardlaw, LDU, Phillips, Simpkin, Powell winning the ball in tight, expressing that ball out to the second touch player who's on the outside. And that's where I see Dylan Stephens really linking up well, getting score involvements, impacting the game as a relieving kick out of the back line, using his run and class to link up and connect with his forward half of the team. So I really like this move for North Melbourne. I think there's definitely going to be some value there for us in fantasy and SuperCoach. Is it enough that in Classic of salary cap formats that we should start him? Look, it might not be, but let's consider that. Let's keep a little watch list on there. I definitely think there's at least 25 to 30 points per game of value on top of this. And if the fixture is friendly early, if the matchups are good for wingmen, if the preseason elements we see of how North Melbourne want to play the game under Alistair Clarkson, we know there's some fantasy friendly elements to the way North Melbourne and Clarko love to play the game. So he might just be a guy that for 3, 4, 5 weeks gets us somewhere, potentially very Will Setterfield-esque. Not the type of player, but in terms of the type of guy that's priced at a spot that actually all you need is 4 or 5 weeks, you jump off and you get that bottomed out premium. So for me, I think there's a consideration in Classic. In drafts, he'll go way later than he should because his price of average is being discounted because of significant number of vest games this year. So for me, I like Dylan Stephens. In drafts, you should absolutely be looking at him mid to late, and in Classic, I think he's genuinely an option, but let's wait to see what the other discounted players are we have in and around that spot, because there is a world where there's enough value going around that we won't require him. Equally, we need to look at a player of his capacity and potential if we get some things not go our way. But what do you think? Do you agree or disagree on my take on Dylan Stephens? You can have your say in the comments below, whether it be for North Melbourne, for the Swans, or for those of us that play AFL Fantasy, SuperCoach and Dream Team. Every single time a player moves clubs this off-season, I'll record one of these videos for you, giving you my take on what it means for us that play fantasy football. I can't wait to be back with you very soon with another player review. If you haven't caught up on them already, just click on the playlist link and you will be able to see every single player review that we've released so far. Thanks for watching. We can't wait to chat with you about another player very soon.